They say our bodies are made up of entirely new cells every 7 years. So, is it true that allergies can change every 7 years? This week, we're digging into if that's true, how your immune system evolves over time, and whether your kids will inherit your allergies. All that and more on this week's My Allergist Dad.
Throat tickle or itchy eye, skin rash or a patch of hives. If allergies got you down bad, then just ask my allergist, My Allergist Dad.
Welcome to My Allergist Dad. I'm Drew, and I'm joined by my dad, who is surviving the largest snowfall Rhode Island has ever experienced or recorded. I guess I don't know how far back it would go.
Supposedly there's more snow than the blizzard of 78.
Which is, if you live in Rhode Island, you know that that's a historic blizzard, or if you're from Rhode Island or have spent any time there. But I'm here with my dad, who's surviving the storm, perennial top doc for allergy and immunology in Rhode Island, Dr. Z. How you doing?
I'm doing fine, Drew. It is quite the sight to see streets not plowed.
A picture was shared in our family group chat where you see a snowplow that is stuck on the corner of my parents' home. So the snow is so high that even snowplows are having trouble with it.
The mayor sent a picture, and the mayor basically had to halt plows because the visibility was so bad from snow that was about 4 inches an hour. It was quite the blizzard.
Did you leave any clothes outside to prevent dust mites or stuffed animals outside to prevent dust mites like you taught us about?
No, because you don't want them to get wet.
Okay, smart. Are there major implications of allergies or asthma with snow?
I think there are a lot of implications with this weather. A lot of people with asthma, especially those that aren't well controlled, change in barometric pressure really sets them off. And this weather sets off asthma. And even more importantly, this weather keeps people from getting emergency care. And many people who aren't on top of their meds and then do worse, and the pharmacies, even 24-hour, were not open. I'm sure there's been problems because of such a storm, which only talks about the importance of preparation.
Stock up on your Benadryl, stock up on your antihistamines, maybe make sure you have an extra dose of your sublingual immunotherapy that you do at home.
And that's the benefit of having sublingual immunotherapy at home. You can keep up with your treatment, but make sure your inhalers are up to date, your EpiPens are up to date. All those things are so important to have when you can't renew them, as simple as life we've become so accustomed to.
Well, we have an interesting patient-submitted question today, kind of a trifecta of related questions that we've touched on, I think, in certain ways, and definitely, but I think are definitely rich areas to discuss deeper. So, is it true that allergies can change every 7 years? Is it possible to naturally outgrow allergies without treatment? And then, sort of somewhat related to that we can tackle later is, can allergies be hereditary?
So, I think that this 7-year, in my experience, is probably not true, but the fact that your immune system continually changes and evolves is true. Our immune system doesn't live in a vacuum. It's affected by our own underlying health. We spoke about the metabolic syndrome affecting our immune system. We spoke about hormonal changes affecting our immune system. We spoke about how emotions affect our immune system. All of those change as you age and your circumstances change. So with that, your immune system changes. As I always say, it's interesting. I was taught, and I think pediatricians were emphasized it even more so, that most infants don't have allergies. They don't have reactivity to environmental allergens. And it was taught you do not skin test or assess for allergen sensitivity in any toddler, anybody under 2 years of age. And a lot of pediatricians would tell their patients that you really don't need to see an allergist for allergy tests until around 6, 7, or 8. And I was also taught that after 40, your allergy reactivity drops significantly. And those ways of speaking, those ideas really aren't true today. As you know, with your new nephew, at 5.5 months, he broke in hives being licked by my dog, my quote, hypoallergenic dog. And he broke out in hives, and we skin tested him at 5.5 months, and he had very large positive skin tests. So he has allergy antibodies to it. So to wait 2 years to ignore it, I've tested young children who are 1 year old, 12 months old, 18 months, and their pet dander was the reason for their eczema. Similarly, I've had 90-year-olds with significant allergen sensitivity. So whatever has affected our environment that's affected our immune system has changed some of those sayings or wives' tale. Getting back to the 7 years, your immune system does change, and maybe it's recognized or becomes more notable on a 7-year interval, but it does change in time because it's reacting and going along with your lifestyle. And that's why it's good to bring it up all the time. We spoke about metabolic syndrome, how many of my patients speak about how they have type 2 diabetes, but at the same time, they all seem to have fatty liver and they have gallstones and they have this, they have high blood pressure because it's all part of this metabolic syndrome. And they showed that metabolic syndrome affects asthma in a different way than a younger asthma. So the answer is, I wouldn't say 7 years, but your immune system changes and it continually changes.
The 7 years is an interesting thing. I mean, have you heard medically, is it true, or is it just sort of a urban legend that your body is made up of entirely new cells every 7 years?
I never heard that one, but your cells continuously renew. I think you've already renewed by 7 years.
So it seems like the 7 year new allergies or changing allergies, that's sort of an arbitrary number. But, our environments are changing, our diets are changing, our hormones are changing, and that all affects reactivity, allergic reactions, some IgE mediated reactions that are allergies by definition, and some reactions that present like allergies.
But getting into what will be our next question about hereditary is this thing called epigenetics. Forgetting about what's happening to our bodies, our environment, and not even what we're doing to our environment. It's now 6 years since and officially in March 1st or whatever, since the pandemic started. COVID-19 has affected the immune system, the immune reactivity, the adrenal glands in so many ways. That's less than 7 years ago. And so many people, their immune systems have been affected by that. So there's something that is coexisting with our allergy and our regular clinical immune system that wasn't taught or expected and has had dramatic effects.
People always say to me, wow, it's so convenient that your dad is an allergist, but it's not really convenient. It's why I have allergies. I have allergies because my dad had allergies and he passed them on to me, and he became an allergist because of those allergies. So when I first saw that hereditary question, that was the first thing I thought of.
Right. And I inherited from your grandfather, who had allergies, had and still has mild asthma, and according to his pediatrician, had the largest folder in his practice until I came along. And so that he inherited, and your grandfather inherited from his father, who inherited from his father.
And now my nephew has allergies too, so that we keep paying it forward.
Yes, it's in the family.
Yeah. Tied to this, I guess we're kind of jumping between, hereditary, naturally changing allergies. In the same respect, have you found that people can naturally outgrow allergies, or is it more just that people outgrow allergies through intentional intervention?
People do. They love to say the word outgrow, but I like to say it goes into remission.
Hmm.
Your immune system changes, becomes more tolerant. You see a lot of that with boys, especially when they become adolescents. A third of them or more, their asthma and allergy improves. So that's a factor. And then as girls become adolescent, go into adolescence and then become women, their reactivity, their allergies, their immune system changes. So some of it goes into remission. I see many patients now who will say that even women, they had really bad allergies. They were on shots in their 20s and their 30s. Everything went into remission. I think for a lot of women, pregnancy plays a role in making worse, but a lot of them get better. It changes their immune system. And then all of a sudden, it'd be stress. Recently, it's the pandemic, or now they're perimenopause and menopausal, and they're having a lot of allergy symptoms again. So it goes into remission, it comes back, different things play a role.
And I mean, there's also like when we talk about you grow up with a dog, you go to college, and when you come back, your allergies are worse. But if you were to then be with that dog for the same amount of exposure that you were pre-college, would your allergies go back into remission, or would you just now have allergies?
For some reason, you have to fix it again. A lot of these kids, that's where the immunotherapy is very helpful. I think having continuous exposure, having small amounts of exposure, and some of them just going home for the summer is not always long enough. But if they were back home, they start adapting. But people who do have pets or allergic to pets, have sensitization to pets, after a while they do adapt and they adjust.
I mean, that's unfortunate that you can lose it very quickly, but then you don't get it back quite as quickly. I mean, I guess that's not so surprising when you think about things like fitness and they say, it takes about 2 weeks of not doing your regular exercise output or workload, and then you lose it. Like it doesn't last much longer than I think 2 weeks. And it takes a lot of hard effort to build that back.
We spoke about it again, and I think that's great about this podcast because we repeat discussions and look at it in different ways. I spoke about the Cape Verdean community. We've spoken about that a lot. Where Rhode Island, which is a very unusual little state, and now it's gaining prominence for having so much snow. And anyway, Rhode Island has a large Cape Verdean population. It's a small island off of Africa. And for some reason, these people have very high allergies. They're hereditary, they're genetics.
In Cape Verde or
Here, when they see me, they have so many allergies. And you start seeing family members, et cetera, the kids, the grandchildren, the cousins, they have significant. And I remember when I used to do allergy testing when I started my practice, their skin test reactivity was off the charts.
Is this something that's been written up, or you think you could do a research or an anthropological study?
I could do research. Maybe it goes back to the Portuguese community because somehow because there's some Portuguese part of the Cape Verdes, because I'm doing an allergy research trial and north of Boston is and many of the patients, their friends, they encourage them to come. They're all from Brazil. And these Brazilians have so many allergies here. It's incredible. They're very allergen sensitivity and they have huge skin
Portugal, known for octopus,
great sardines,
and passing along hereditary allergies to places it colonizes.
It's incredible. But Cape Verdes, they all say they never had allergies in their country. They're like, no one in their country has allergies, but they all have allergies when they come here. So their lifestyle, their diet, their whatever it keeps the state of tolerance. And that's the whole thing that leads up to the next thing we're going to talk about. It's called epigenetics. You inherit a tendency towards something, but it doesn't automatically mean it's going to be expressed. You even look at identical twins. They're not going to always have the same allergies. They have the genetic predisposition, but something turns it on. They see it all the time. It's something in the environment turns on the genetics. And if you don't have that switch, you may not express the allergy tendency. And so, yes, allergies, asthma, and also you inherit the predisposition toward what we call the atopic state. That doesn't mean that everybody is going to express it in the same way.
So atopic, that's the like predisposition to eczema, asthma, allergies. But just because you're atopic doesn't mean that you're gonna have allergies or asthma or eczema. Is it stress? Is it diet?
It could also be viral exposures. There's a lot of things. I mean, if you look at my family, there are four of us. Two of us have the asthma and allergies. One had some allergies and now has some food stuff, and one has none. And the same genetics, the same family. And so there's a lot of different things. It's what you're exposed to. The theory about me was I was home and my two older siblings would bring viruses to me all the time. And I was on so much antibiotics and infections. Who knew if they should give me all those antibiotics back then? But whatever it is, it really turned it on for me.
I mean, you look at me and my siblings, and we have different allergies.
Exactly.
We inherited a predisposition to allergies, but they all express differently.
Right. And you probably got sensitized to the peanuts from them because they were all over you and eating peanut butter.
Yeah, because that's something we've talked about before. But of my siblings and I'm the only one who has a peanut allergy. I was 13 months. We had a picnic in the garage. Did you intentionally give me peanut butter then?
No, you crawled over and grabbed your older brother's peanut butter. In those days, you were delaying it. And you grabbed your older brother's peanut butter sandwich and you ate it.
And I had a reaction. And it's usually not the first exposure that you have a reaction, which makes my dad, the allergy expert, theorize that I was probably exposed through skin, or something through my siblings having dirty peanut butter hands at some point, probably touching me. An exposure is not the same as like an epigenetic trigger, right? An exposure is just when you get the sensitization, but an epigenetic trigger could be a broader category, right?
It just means that you have the genetics, and for some reason, you got exposed enough to express it. All I'm saying is you inherit a predisposition toward allergies of any type. How you express it, or if you're going to express it, really depends on your environment.
And that also ties into like the when. So if you're, an atopic person, you may not express your allergy until later in life because of whatever changes maybe in your environment, maybe in your stress, maybe in your hormones.
Correct. And also your skin. And that comes from another.
What do you mean?
Well, we're looking at your nephew who is already starting to express allergies, and we're doing all the allergy prevention stuff with him. But his skin is such that kids with eczema or atopic dermatitis like him, they often have the biggest food allergies.
And that's all about barriers, because we talk about barriers where, if you have a lot of eczema, that means you have a weaker barrier. You're going to get more exposure to things that may sensitize you.
Correct. But one could look at it from the other point of view, is all the preventative things that we're working on have made it less severe.
Unless there's something in the moisturizer that maybe becomes an allergy.
I think it was a licking dog.
Is she with you? Is she doing okay in the snow?
Yes. I mean, I have to control it. But now all these people have been making paths. There are all these paths in those streets.
For the dog to walk.
Yeah, for all their dogs. So we're taking advantage of it.
Well, she's not a big walker to begin with, so.
No, but she's doing okay in those paths.
Okay, good.
Yes, we've been very good with this snowstorm. And it's time they plow.
Is the visibility better?
No, today's a gorgeous sunny day. They just have a lot of work to do. It's just hard to move 3 feet of snow. Everybody else is having a foot and a half. Suddenly a foot and a half. It's kind of like when it's 20 below zero wind chill factor and it's so cold. Suddenly when it's 20 degrees out, it's like, it's like Florida.
Yeah. I mean, but does that mean you're going to have like 6 feet tall, like banks of snow along all the street, or are they going to melt a lot of it?
Right. Remember 10 or 12 years ago, we had that. We had snow that just was high forever, or it just went into May. You had huge piles of snow.
Yeah.
It'll be that way again this year. And we're supposed to get snow now into the week.
Do you think that'll affect the pollen season?
Oh, yeah. Because when you have a lot of snow and a lot of cold, and it kind of like delays the plants, when the tree season comes out later and it overlaps with grass, or it's so late that the pollen's just like bursting, it's usually a bad spring.
But good for your business.
Make up for this week, right?
Yeah. I guess you can't go into the office until you can physically drive there.
Well, I'm not. My staff, some of my staff are now doing some telemedicine visits today, particularly for the food allergy patients. It's actually easier.
Oh, that's good. So do you think then this snow could lead to a really big pollen trigger that maybe even some people develop pollen allergies in the spring?
That's my experience, and we'll discuss it in May. Mother's Day weekend is often when things are bad, but some patients start early April.
Mark your calendars, Mother's Day, when you tune in to the episode that I guess will probably come out 3 or so weeks after Mother's Day. We'll see how many people have allergies now, assuming the snow's melted.
Mother's Day is typically a bad weekend. I mean, the pollen starts sometimes as early as March, but it really revs up. And the reason you have to understand that pollen levels and symptom levels aren't concordant, because we've spoken about it before. It's called an early and late phase response to allergies, which is why I always say the nasal steroid should be your first line drug medicine for nasal allergies instead of the antihistamine, because they prime as you're exposed to the allergy season, and it triggers the inflammatory response. It's not all histamine, and it primes you, so it needs less and less allergen to lead to triggers.
So you're saying take your nasal spray so that you don't get as many allergies into like the nasal passage?
No, it's because the nasal spray blunts the priming effect. It's called the late phase response to allergies. So I don't remember when the study came out, but I remember reading, this is like 20 years ago, just like I'm doing a trial now, they challenge people to the allergen out of season. And so they have these pollen blowing booths where they test a medicine. They have all these patients sitting there. So they spoke about a ragweed trial, and ragweed season is typically mid-August through September. So years ago, they did a study and they recruited patients with severe fall ragweed allergy symptoms. And they were testing the medicine, but patients had to have a certain level of symptoms to make it statistically significant. So they had the people in the little pollen room where they were blowing pollen and they're reading and doing symptom scores. And this was, let's say, in February. And these people had given histories and demonstrated by medical records that they had severe symptoms in the fall. And very few of them had symptom scores in response to the pollen being blown in, which was supposedly a larger number than they were naturally exposed to. And that was very confusing to the people who were studying this. And so then it didn't make sense. So they brought the people back, let's say a week or two later, and they repeated the whole procedure. And then they noticed that many people were symptomatic at much lower levels than before. And what they recognized, it's called a priming effect. So when you look at symptom scores, and they've shown this in studies that's been reported, and they've shown it in graphs, that when they show the daily pollen levels outside and symptom scores, they find as the season progresses, even though the pollen counts drop, the symptom scores go up.
Because more people become sensitized in the initial exposure when it's bigger?
It's not more people are sensitized. It's that the allergic response, called the late phase response, is triggering its allergy antibodies on their mast cells. It's just causing them it's a domino effect.
So they get a lot of allergen exposures, but they don't start becoming reactive until later. and they have a lower threshold of what will be reactive later.
Right. And that's why as the season progresses, they get much more symptomatic because their body, in response to the allergen triggers, are making more allergy antibodies, more allergy antibody receptors for them on the allergy cells called the mast cells, which triggers a more robust response to the allergen exposure, which triggers more inflammatory cells. And it exponentially worsens to the point where they're miserable as the season goes.
So, to your point about doing nasal spray earlier in the season, that makes it so you don't get as exposed to the big burst of allergens. Is that what it is? That your body
Yeah, you're
doesn't?
still exposed to the big bursts of allergens by doing the nasal steroids. It blunts the late phase response.
Okay, so you're doing nasal steroids so that what your mast cells, your IgEs aren't as reactive in the first wave, and then later they won't be as reactive in the later waves.
It's blunting the inflammatory response. A better way to understand it clinically if you have bad allergies. Most people, as the season goes, it's their nasal congestion, their sneezing, their runny nose, all that mucus that's bothering them. And their nose is clogged. And they find that the antihistamine, especially the newer ones that don't cause sedation, the second generation, they're not helping it. And ends up they go on prednisone, the steroid. And that's because the antihistamines don't do anything with congestion. That's why many of these people resort to buying these antihistamine nasal decongestant combination medicines. That nasal congestion, the increased mucus, the really bad sneezing, not the initial sneezing, but the really bad nasal congestion and mucus is that inflammatory response that's secondary to the initial stimulus.
So if you make sure that you're taking your nasal steroid, then that'll reduce inflammation, reduce congestion, and then that'll help prevent and improve your late stage response.
Right. And make it a more tolerable season, though the worst patients still, it's not good. But many patients save the nasal spray till afterwards. A lot don't like sprays, et cetera. They hear the word steroid.
But it's a good preventative.
And that's the thing that's an important concept because, and the same thing for asthma. A lot of people don't like the word steroid, so they avoid the preventative asthma med, the preventative allergy med, et cetera. But they're in micrograms. And when they're so miserable or they end up going to the ER or urgent care because they weren't taking the meds, they end up going on oral prednisone at much higher dose. And the side effects are really from the cumulative effect of the drugs. So they end up exposing themselves to more steroid.
So it's really the ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Exactly. And new studies are showing even the most mild asthmatics end up having a couple exacerbations a year that give them more steroid, 100 times more steroid exposure than they would had they been on their daily med.
So I guess to tie back to the question, if you're on that nasal steroid early on, I guess if you don't have allergies, if you were to take that nasal steroid, could you prevent the development of sensitization and allergies?
No, but that's a good question.
Okay, well, I tried. Well, I think we answered those questions, just to kind of run through it. Allergies, is it true that allergies can change every 7 years? Technically, yes, but that's sort of an arbitrary number. Allergies can change. You can sensitize kind of at any given point, and you can have allergies go in remission at any point. Is it possible to naturally outgrow allergies without treatment? Sounds like that's
Yes.
true. And then can allergies be hereditary? Very much so, but it's more of an epigenetic thing. So it's not a guarantee that you're going to inherit your allergies, but it's that you're going to inherit a predisposition to develop allergies, which may express itself in very different ways.
Well put, Drew. You always summarize so well. So proud of you.
Well, I've been learning my whole life by spending so much time with a decorated allergist. So I'm definitely not at the same level, but maybe at a level that I can be a good liaison, which is exactly what I'm doing. Thank you all so much for checking out the show. Hopefully we answered that listener's questions. If you're enjoying these conversations, subscribe so you don't miss new episodes. It also helps more people find the show, which we really appreciate. Again, follow the link in our description to send us your questions. Email us at myallergistdad@gmail.com so we can answer your questions on the show. Dad, before you go back to waiting for the snowplows to resume, any final thoughts?
No, this is once again so much fun.
I would have to agree. Stay warm, stay safe, and talk to you next week.
If allergies got you down bad, then just ask my allergist, my allergist dad.
The My Allergist Dad podcast is for general informational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice, and no doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from this podcast is at the user's own risk. The content of this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice for any medical condition they may have and should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions.